Hi, everyone. I'm kind of in a thinking mood tonight. And, we're so rarely afforded that in adulthood, I feel like. Whenever the mood strikes, I like to indulge it as much as possible. So I thought, hey, why not take y'all for a ride? So I kind of have an unhinged story about Werner Herzog. And for once, it doesn't center around anything that he did, but something that I have done. And Herzog, if you're watching, I apologize. So the occupation that I do is pretty much full of squares. Work in in this field was like the first time that I was ever asked, probably in my entire life, like, you like horror movies? Like, why? Like, don't you feel like that, like the evil is just like goes through the screen and and inside you and that just haunts you? Um, and I should clarify, like, none of these people are religious. They're just like that prim and proper, you know? They're just that Puritan. And it's really disheartening. And I think it's like kind of an aspect of like why this field kind of has a bad rap for all these people that are like, so defined by their righteousness that they kind of really fail to help anyone find their own. And you know what? I could sit back, I could despair as the black sheep, but you know what? Honestly, I kind of have a great time with it. All right, I'm gonna be honest, I have a pretty good time. Um, so one day, getting back to the Herzog story. So one day I'm sitting in the office, I'm kind of bored. There's like this empty picture frame there, don't know why. But I thought, you know what, like, why not put a picture of Herzog in there? See what people say. People started asking me like, who is that? Because I really don't have pictures of like anyone. Doing the job I do, the nature of my job, it's sort of like being a superhero where you have to keep that shit separate. You don't really want people knowing where you live, what car you drive, the people around you. It's never a great idea. He's a public figure, but these are squares, remember? So none of them know who the fuck Werner Herzog is. So he became my dad. When people started asking, I was like, yeah, it's my dad. That's my dad, who I love and have a weird sort of relationship with. He's sort of like my daddy dad. But Herzog became a dad. So happy Father's Day on Sundays. You got a new daughter. But yeah, I kind of snowballed from there, and I started like telling them stories about my dad, like that I read in his books or heard in interviews, and then the whole office came so enamored with like, your dad is a riot, and you clearly have so much love for your dad, and they just adored it, and they adore Herzog now. So I exposed an entire office to people who would never find Herzog probably on their own. And now in this very bizarre, uh, you know, roundabout way, I have an entire office who's like your devotees. um, and I'm a bit proud of it. I am a bit proud of it, and I don't think I'm ever gonna get caught. Okay, like I'm never gonna get caught. These people are never gonna find out who Herzog is. I'm never gonna get caught. I'm gonna get away with it. I mean, it is kind of a little bit of a fantasy. Like one day when I'm far away from this godforsaken fucking place I work now, I think like one day someone's gonna be like, "Wait a second, isn't that baby's dad? What? Famous film director Werner Herzog." Damn it. I'm so glad that she's out of this place. Like, God. Oh my God, the weirdo, you know? They don't like, they hate it, but they also love it. They've come to love it. They don't know it. They don't know that they're getting microdosed. Insanity. But that's what I'm here for. So yeah, I mean, I guess I've always been a bit of a freak show, and I gotta say, I do enjoy it. Like especially in this field. Like I still remember like my first day working prison reentry. I mean, I was just like, who the fuck is that? People were staring at me. They started introducing themselves, like outright just asking me, like, who are you? Like, Who the fuck are you? What are you doing here? I think a couple of people actually did ask me like that. And you know what? They came to love me though. They came to love me and my pug at the time, Hamlet. It's like it's just I can't even begin to describe to you just like a room full of people with like eyelid tattoos and shit. Just like asking like what's Hamlet gonna be for Halloween this year? And me passing around photos of like his summer of 23 photo shoot with his new sailor suit on. And like when it was raining outside, oh, let me walk you to your car with an umbrella, and hopefully Hamlet has his little raincoat on today. And I was like, you know it, with the rubber ducky on it. And to them, I was the weirdest person they'd ever met, And elsewhere, it's just kind of been like, it's a vibe or things that I knew or liked or, that have kind of a fact too, probably that I carry a bit so far. It's like, I mean, I could probably have my actual father, that's not a German director. Like, start to feel uncertain with his own biology, Like, and I think like the real secret to getting people to flatteringly and I'll admit it, unflatteringly say, I've never met anyone like you. I spent and spend a lot of time alone. So, to say I feel kind of a kinship to the two characters we're going to follow in tonight's double feature is a bit of an understatement. But I got for you tonight The Enigma of Kaspar Hauser that came out in 1974 with The Elephant Man that came out in 1980. So, it's impossible to pick a favorite Herzog. I can't do it. It's like asking me, it's just like a Sophie's choice. It's like, I can't do it. It's like sometimes, okay, it's a little bit of a Bad Lieutenant with Nick Cage, one of his best performances. Sometimes a little bit of a feel bad classic like Waysack, or maybe like a haunting, yet very tender and uplifting documentary about the blind and those that were, born and then actually developed, some of them blind and deaf. Damn, God, that was fucking great, but haunting. Or like one of his many Klaus Kinski hallucinatory delusion fests, um, culminating in Cobra Verde, which always is kind of like beckons me. It's a little siren song of like, I'm your favorite, Katie. And it's like, a Cobra Verde, you might be, I'm not ruling it out. Or in this case tonight, Kaspar Hauser, which is Herzog's most endearing film, I think. And I was not aware of the real story of Kaspar Hauser before I watched this. And well, the story is like, yeah, it's interesting. I think like Herzog's story behind it, like how he picked Casper, just kind of makes it even more so. Of course, in a very Herzogian way. Like he was like watching this documentary on street performers, and he came across the main actor. And he had no training in acting at all whatsoever, quite possibly didn't even want to be an actor, which, let's be honest, this would not be Herzog's first time directing an actor by force. And Herzog just had to have him, he's like, I gotta have that guy. That's Casper right there. And he was just credited simply as Bruno S, you know, and was apparently kind of Casper in a lot of respects. Like he left his costume on full time, and when they'd finished filming, he like slept on his hotel floor, and he was just generally like a kind of a knowable guy, and it's like Herzog's favorite type of guy. And I think he was only in one other film, which is Streisand. Um, and okay, I do want to make one little aside though here because I did mention like Herzog directing an actor by force, and I did want to bring up this story because I do think it's kind of it's funny because people like tell the story and then people have kind of heard like because I don't know if it was like from My Best Fiend or is in one of his books or something that he like actually goes into it and he's like no 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 I detest those rumors, um like I did not direct Kinski at gunpoint. I mean, I did, but I didn't threaten homicide, okay? I I did not say like get out there and act or I'm going to shoot you. I put the gun to my own head and threatened suicide if he didn't finish the scene. And it's like I just love him so much. I love him to death that he thought like that would change the narrative so profoundly. Like no 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 not homicide. It was merely I threatened suicide. I did direct him at gunpoint, yes, but the gun was pointed at me. It's like yeah, thanks for the clarification, Urs. That does a world of difference. And oh god, that man is just the love of my life. I just he's the light of my life. I just I love him so much. I wish he was my real dad. Um, but back to Casper, he was a man who was raised in complete isolation for over 15 years of his life. He was literally like chained in this little room, given a couple of wooden toys. This weird man like occasionally came in and fed him. And mysteriously, he's just like released. He's given like a few phrases to kind of repeat, and then is like just left in this major town, and um, so he becomes kind of this freak show. And he's literally put to work in a circus at first, and then he's like rescued by this intellectual, and he teaches him how to be a sophisticate, and I almost paired it with Poor Things because of the real like childlike curiosity for the world around him. Like he kind of has to learn, just like Bella, like has to learn how to be um a human being, but in the size, or in the body and the size of an adult. And we get to really see, the synthesis for intelligent thought and how kind of silly that looks in an adult, right? And how, but it also kind of like shows us other things, like how we kind of just accept things in adulthood, because that's the way they are, instead of just like challenging things and this sort of really beautiful naivety that both Bella and Casper share. And I think that's what I enjoy most about working with kids. Because as a person who's like, no, I knew I kind of never wanted to have kids, but I really enjoy them. And I enjoy being around them because they're little twisted sick freaks. And that's what I love about them. It's like, they're not afraid to ask questions. Like, what are their favorite questions? Why? um, and like, it's just, they're not like, it's like with experience, like to me, it's like, you know, there's a lot of things that come with life experience, right? But like we also lose a lot too. And we kind of refine that kind of inner little weirdo, to where some, I mean, look around. It's like some adults, like in my line of work, it's like you don't even have the remnants left of that little freak that I know you were. Like, and it's like, I feel like even with the question why, like adults get so fraught, when you ask that question. And it's like, and I get it, like kids can take it way too far. Like it's like, okay, you don't need to know why. And I already answered it like 5 questions ago. 5 whys ago, I answered it. We don't need to go over it again. And but it's like, I think it's more just like people are afraid of like looking like a root or making people uncomfortable or like I don't want to look dumb or stupid. And I feel like kids are free from that. Like they're allowed to kind of think with less self-imposed filters. And with like the little influence of the outside world, like Casper's kind of allowed to embody this. And he's heralded for his avant garde way of thinking and becomes this like idiosyncratic philosopher. And of course, there's always those who are gonna, exploit the situation for their own gains, and especially those that kind of seek him out as this like upper class court jester. But you know what? It's like they're the real simpletons. They can't see this magnificent man, untouched by what's molded our minds, filtered our minds, and he's lovable and he's memorable and exceptionally neurodivergent and ridiculous in a way that makes him just nothing else but iconic. A true Herzog proxy. So The Elephant Man is not the first movie, not even the first David Lynch movie that I saw over an adult's shoulder. So when I was really young and my dad was still around, like my parents would watch movies late at night. And there was like this secret little nook I could get in, like where they couldn't see me, but I had a great view of the TV. And I saw a lot of great movies this way. It's like I saw Pulp Fiction this way, I saw Blue Velvet this way, The Elephant Man. Similarly, I saw Showgirls in a drive-in. I wasn't there to see Showgirls, but it was playing on another screen, which like sounds like how was that even really allowed? But I watched it in silent fascination. I don't even remember what I was there to see. I do remember watching that in silent fascination. I learned to read lips like watching that movie. And I fell in love, with the films I saw this way because it felt like this really like forbidden world and one that I like kind of understood in a very like childlike way. And they've kind of like stayed rooted in that experience, which I think is kind of amazing. And I get a lot of nostalgia when I watch those films. And only really was it later that I realized, no one was really paying attention to anything I did. So I could kind of like watch whatever I wanted to. And in this way, like introduced me to like so many things that like, would I have viewed them age appropriately. It would have been so different. And, it wouldn't have kept me so curious, I think. Like, one of the things that I remember finding in like a childhood memory box was like in a child's handwriting, sallow fan fiction, trying to make sense of what I had just watched. But instead of like scaring me or scarring me, I learned what art was. And I have an exceptional experience with that. And I feel like that's why I'm not always the best person to ask, like, can my kid watch this? It's like, uh, like, if it was up to me, sure. Some people may not have had that same experience, but hey, man, that's what you learn what art was. Like, that was me watching it going like, that's fucking art, man. That's fucking art, man. I'm gonna go and misspell a bunch of things and write it in a child's handwriting, and then someone's gonna dig it out years later and be like, "What in the fuck happened to you?" It's like that's when I was learning about art. That's me learning about art, guys. Um, but I loved the Elephant Man. I loved the Elephant Man. And of course, this being me, like obviously I'm just gonna fully disclose. Like I thought he was adorable. I fell in love with him. I remember just like, of course, like him and that white mask, like walking around outside. Like that was like it wasn't etched in my head like of the scary thing. It was etched in my heart. It's like I knew he was under there. There wasn't just a man. Like it's like I'm not an animal, I'm a man. It's like, you know what? You're a soul. You're not even a man. You're a soul in there, and I could see it through the cloth. Um, but and I also just like I think I was already predetermined because I loved monster movies ever since I first started watching films at like 3 years old. The first film I remember watching over and over and over and over again was E.T. Um, at like 3 years old, and then the Universal Monsters, and just fell in love with them. And that's why I did. I fell in love with their souls. It was like, you're watching Frankenstein, and he's like drowning a girl who looks like you. And it's like, or King Kong's kidnapping a blonde lady who looks like you. And it's like, but I was like, I wasn't scared of it. I was like, you know what? They don't know, I even at three, I'm like, you know what? I just the Frankenstein doesn't know. He just was like, we're throwing pretty things in the water, picked you up, threw you in. King Kong was just like, I like you. He wanted to be friends. They want to be companions. They want to be friends. They want connection. That's the most human thing you can be, even as a monster. And I just loved it. Like even then I was like, you know what? You know what? I'd like a judge to look at that because that's not right. They're persecuting him. Like you learn what persecution is. It's like that. Yeah, I see it. I get it. I'm a little 4-year-old and judging the fuck out of you. And I really was too. It was. But it's like, look, it was like because of their malformations, because of their frightening and ghastly features, it just made them lonely. And even from a young age, I joke now, but it's like even at a young age, it's like I was really a patron saint of God's lonely creatures. Still am, sometimes to my detriment. But in The Elephant Man too, a funny thing that I realized later on in life as I was watching it with my pug at the time was like he kind of sounds like a pug or bulldog. It's like when I was watching, I remember I was like watching it and I was like listening to him breathe and I was like, you know what? It's so weird. This has become white noise to me because my entire adult life has been filled with the symphony of snores and snorts and gasps of these silly creatures I keep around me. I was like, is that him doing that or is that on the screen? It sounds a little bit loud. It's like, but you know what? Who knows? Who knows in my life? Um, so I think I like was like predetermined to like these things. It's just like looking back through my life, it's like ET, monster, yeah, and then now, okay, yeah, have them like just a circus freak show of grotesque animals. Oh, I love them. They're so cute. But yeah, it's like, it's like it, what I really loved about it is that he was kind and he was brilliant. And instead of like anyone considering these possibilities about John, they used him for their like this repository of their cruelty. And I just hate in this world that like the most innocent things are those that attract the most harm. And it's something probably from these movies because I really do feel like narratives are so important to just consume and interact with from an early age because I do think they teach empathy. And this is something that I like have noticed with things that I've watched. It's like, yeah, and I have this really like unwitting yet very powerful protective instinct in me for things of this nature. And but John's story follows much of like Casper's. He's taken in by this educated man and he learns the sophistications of life and but he has the huge contrast of like his physical malformations and these sort of visual ideations expose poor John to the more hideous side of human nature. And it just kind of shows us too, like even though like the upper classes kind of take him in, it's like yeah, people of all socioeconomic classes though are prone to turning him into entertainment. Not everyone's there as a pure heart and soul, um but he does meet other pure souls, which is it's like that there's this thing in life that I feel like where it's like there are certain beings that you will meet that have just this extra light behind their eyes, right? And with more life experience, I feel like not only do you come to realize that those people exist, and those beings, I'm just going to say beings, because I feel like every living being can have this thing where it's just this extra light. But I also feel like there's only certain people that can see it too. But everyone should be afforded dignity, whether you can see the light or not. And I feel like my house is it's living proof that the more grotesque you shine brighter than the sun at high noon in my eyes. So gather my tired, my huddled abominations, oddities, curiosities, yearning to breathe free. You are not without a home. Where Herzog and David Lynch exist, you are celebrated and seen. Have a great time checking these two out, and I'll see you on the next one.